Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tinnitist TV. Today, I am talking to the one and only Ron Sexsmith. These days, the Canadian singer-songwriter is feeling right at home, and in more ways than one. In a very real sense, Sexsmith says he's finally settled in and embraced a quiet life in the Ontario countryside, where he moved several years back after decades of living in Toronto. But on a more personal level, the 59-year-old artist says he also feels more comfortable in his own skin and more content with the state of his career right now. You can hear all of that maturity in every groove of his 17th studio album, The Vivian Line. Named for a road near his house that he thinks of as the dividing line between his old and new lives, the album blends wistful romantic ballads with lighthearted homespun tales of country living. A couple of weeks before it arrived, Ron zoomed in from, where else, his home, to discuss his Luddite leanings, turning 60, partying with Kim Cattrall, and plenty more. Enjoy. Ron Sexsmith, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was excited because I've been doing a lot of interviews already for Ireland and stuff, but I hadn't done any in Canada yet. I was starting to worry, no one wants to talk to me here. So anyway, so
I thought we forgot about you.
Oh, it happens from time to time, yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's and I was checking out your site last night online to see some of the other interviews and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for doing that. And hey, I got to say, compliments on the Vivian Line. I mean, 17 albums. That is a hunk of work. That's a catalog. That's a legacy. That's a career.
Thank you. I mean, I always wanted to have a body of work, I mean, when I got signed, I was already 30, which seemed old, for the music business. And I felt I really had to hustle to try to, make up for lost time. And so, yeah, looking back on it now, it's like, it's kind of surreal because, I wrote all the songs and I've just, the thing I guess I'm mostly proud of is that I hung in there, because for a guy who's never sold a lot of records, I think I've been able to, keep it going and I've built a sort of a loyal fan base,
Oh yeah, one fan at a time, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when we've talked in the past, you've always seemed a little anxious. Like you've always, back in the day, I always kind of got the sense that you felt that somebody was just waiting around the corner to come and kind of take it all away from you. But for the past couple of albums, it seems like you're, I don't know, more settled and content and happier. Am I reading that right, or are you totally still just as anxious as you were?
No, I think you're right. I think, in the old days, I mean, for me in the 90s, I really did feel like I was, competing, with every other songwriter. And I wasn't, and I was on this label, Interscope, that had so many big selling artists, and I wasn't one of them. So I was always afraid it was going to be dropped, which they did after, I made my fourth album. Right. But yeah, I remember I just couldn't figure out how to do it, Ryan Adams was good at posing with a cigarette in front of an old typewriter or something like, I just I wasn't able to project this thing, and the music I was making wasn't what radio was playing. So I think I was always a bit anxious that it could all end at any time. But I don't really feel that anymore. I don't feel like I'm in competition with anyone. I'm on the service road kind of the music industry in a way. And all that stuff is like at the Grammys, that's going on over there. Right. I don't really resonate in the culture that way. I just have this sort of cult following. And I'm just way past that, where I don't, I'm hopeful that good things will happen, but I never expect to get radio and all this, but if I do, it's always, it's exciting. But you're right, though, I was for a long time, quite anxious about just everything,
Was there a sort of specific point in your life or your career where it changed, or was it just kind of a gradual, you get older, you figure out things, you get more comfortable with stuff?
Yeah, it was a gradual thing. I mean, you know, I made an album with Bob Rock in 2011 called Long Player Late Bloomer, and it was kind of at the time it felt like a big risk, you know. I just didn't know. I was in a slump, and I'd sort of lost my confidence, and that album did so well for me. I mean, relative, you know, not as well as Eminem or something, but I mean, for me, like
Yeah.
it sold well. I got, you know, we played Royal Albert Hall and all this stuff, and it did wonders for my. I don't know. I felt like I was standing up for myself for the
Mm.
first time, and I think ever since then, I started feeling a little more comfortable in my own skin. That
Mhm.
I kind of, also, I don't think I ever started singing any good until my 8th album, which was Retriever. And so it's just been a learning curve. And something as well about moving out of Toronto, coming to Stratford, really sort of chilled everything out. I just feel a lot more at peace. You know, we have like an owl living on our property and bunnies running around. And, you know,
Nice.
I didn't get a sense of nature really in Toronto, and I
Sure.
didn't really know I needed it so much, you know. So
Well, I was going to bring up the move because obviously it was a huge change in your life, and I can hear it reflected in the music. Not only lyrically, you're writing about a lot more, you know, I mean, barn raising or renovation, I should say, and then, you know, a lot more homespun,
mm.
less urban things. But again, it also just seems to reflect the happiness and lightness and sort of more content place you're in. Has it changed the way that you physically write songs as opposed to just the content of those songs?
um, well, you know, I've always written when I walk around, when I'm walking. Like when I was a courier, I wrote songs back, you know, in the
Really?
eight.
While you were doing your job?
Yeah, well, I was on the job, and in fact, all the songs on my first album were written as when I was a courier, when I was delivering packages. And I think John Prine as well was a
I was going
mailman.
to bring up Prine was a mailman. He told me he used to, yeah, do the write songs on his route. Yeah.
And so, you know, and even the few albums I made before I moved to Stratford, they were sort of becoming happier each one. Like Carousel One was kind of but the difference was when I walk around here in Stratford, you, you know, I mean, in Toronto, you know, I'm walking along busy streets, holding a coffee, cars going by everywhere. And I was blocking it all out because I'm a kind of a space cadet anyway. But here in Stratford, my walk to town is so sort of bucolic, right? I'm walking along the river and there's trees and swans going by and everything. It's a whole different vibe. And I think that contributed to, especially the songs on Hermitage. You know,
Mm.
the album starts with bird sounds, the sounds of cardinals.
Right.
And and there's also a train whistle. That's the other thing I noticed about living in here. At a certain time of day, we'll hear this train whistle in the distance, and I love it. So I just think, yeah, my surroundings definitely, you know, created this. Yeah, maybe you said homespun or whatever. So it's that kind of thing, and just Colleen and I had you know, in a happier place in our relationship, I think.
Did it take you a while to feel at home there?
Yeah, you know, I was sort of dragging my feet. Initially, I didn't want to move, and Colleen wanted to move 5 years earlier or something, but it took some convincing, right? And so when I moved here, I didn't know anybody at first, which I kind of liked. You know, the phone wasn't ringing. I would walk every day, and I'm a guy. I really need to find a routine. I'm sort of compulsive, and so I found my routine. I did my walk. I found which coffee shop I was going to go to every day, and once I settled in with that, then you know, yeah, it was just, it's not often where you get a kind of new phase in your life, right? And this was I never owned a house before, you know, but little by little we started making friends here, because Stratford, you know, it's like a theater town, right? And it's for a small town, there's a lot happening. There's a chef colony and everything. And so we kept getting invited to all these soirees and cocktail parties. I mean, that never happened in Toronto. So we're meeting all these interesting people. And so my initial dream of being a hermit and not ever meeting anyone here went out the window. And all of a sudden it's kind of more our social scene is more kind of hectic than even in Toronto. So I can't even remember if I answered your question or not, but it's just, you know,
It
it's
sounds like you feel at home. I mean, have you gotten,
yeah.
you know, talking about the theater people and all that, have they approached you about getting involved in doing music for stuff?
Well, you know, I wrote a musical. One of the first things I did after I moved here,
I
I wrote,
missed that. What
yeah,
was it?
well, they never, well, see, I wrote a novel called Dear Life
Yes,
that
I
came
have it.
out,
Yeah.
yeah, it came out in 2017.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like that first year that I lived here, when I was walking along the river, I kept imagining it as a musical and writing songs for it. I'd come home and so I've written like 23 songs for this musical. I even did a concert in 2018 here with the Stratford Orchestra and some of the actors where I performed a concert version of the musical. And we definitely were trying to get the attention of the Stratford Fest, and they seemed interested at first, you know, and I don't know if that they're interested anymore, but it's something I'm really proud of. And you know, I've been reaching out. There was a movie film company that I was talking to about possibly turning it into a live action movie. But because I'm not from that world, I feel like you know, I see it so clearly in my head, but it's hard to convince other people
Was
that,
it based on Dear Life or what was the
yeah,
story? Oh,
oh,
okay.
sorry, yeah, it's Dear Life, the musical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because even as I'm writing the book, I kept imagining all the characters breaking out into songs.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of musicals. And the song, it's not a rock opera either. It's like a proper musical, you know, it's
Okay.
like, you know, it's like Oliver or something, you know, it's, I don't know, whatever kind of music that is, you know, it's very sort of melodic, very square in some aspects. And anyway, so it's my dream that someday it'll be more than, you know, I don't know, like even if some small theater company does it, I'd be happy. I would just love it to be on stage.
Yeah, I can't imagine nobody's bid on that one. We'll put the vibes out into the universe and somebody will pick up on
Yeah, if you know anyone in that world, I mean, I don't
it. I think you know more people than I do at this point in
yeah,
that world.
but I keep meeting people and I get excited, get my hopes up, and then it falls through, and which I guess that's the movie business, right? So I don't know. But at the very least, at some point, I'm going to record all the songs and, you know, make it a record or something. So
Cool. Yeah, well, that sounds great. I look forward to that. Let's talk about the Vivian line a little. Now, when you write, I mean, are you just a guy who's, you talked about having a routine and all that, and writing while you walk? Are you somebody who is just constantly writing songs, and albums just kind of form themselves out of that, you know, treasure trove of songs you've got? Is that the way it works for you generally?
well, yeah, I mean, most of these songs came like early 2021, and where I wasn't, you know, I wasn't planning on, you know, writing or doing another album even. I mean, I had Hermitage, and you know what happened with the pandemic, you know, everything got sort of put on hold. Um, and then all of a sudden I think the very first song I wrote was called Ever Wonder. And I really, you know, and then, you know, that's what happens with me. I'll get a song. And usually I find myself in the middle of about 4 or 5 songs,
Hmm.
you know, and they're nowhere near finished yet, but you just know, because I've done this so many times now, you know that if you're patient, ultimately you're gonna finish them.
Right.
And it's exciting feeling, because whenever I finish an album, I never know if I'm gonna get any more ideas for songs, you know.
Really? I mean, I would think by this point you must know that, oh, sure, I might not have an idea this week, but a
Yeah.
month from now I'll have something.
Well, I wasn't sweating it or anything. I wasn't worried, but I just hadn't, all of 2020, I had not written a single song.
Oh,
You
really?
know, yeah, and you know, and I mean, obviously my Hermitage came out that year, so I
Right.
wasn't really in a hurry, or wasn't really worrying about it. But and then yeah, and then it's like the Charlie Brown thing where you want to kick the football. You know, you get these songs, and even when you don't want to make a record, you can't ignore it. You're getting these ideas, and you have to. They want your attention, so you gotta sort of. And every day when I walk, I'll think about it, and I'll get a little further with the song, and then before you know it, you have an album's worth of songs, usually more than an album's worth of songs.
Mm.
And at that point, it's also the other thing I didn't know if Warner was still interested in making another album with me too. So there's that too.
Sure.
Thankfully, they were, and it all came together. I was reacquainted with my friend Brad Jones, who played bass on some of my earlier albums,
Yes.
and we talked years and years ago about doing an album together, and it just never happened. So it was everything seemed very fateful, even recording the album, because we were under lockdown,
Mm.
and all of a sudden there came this brief opening in October of that year where we were allowed to go to America. And we went down there. We felt like we had crossed, enemy lines. I mean, it was this weird feeling of this covert thing. We went down, made the album, came back, and then we were in another lockdown when we came back. So
Mm.
everything just worked out. Yeah, but these songs, in some ways, I felt they were kind of like an extension of the last record in
Mhm.
terms of it was, just the life in the country and that.
Right.
But except this one seemed a little more wistful, and um, there's more sadness on this record, I think. And
Yeah, that's
yeah,
funny because I mean, when I was listening to it, I was still getting the. I mean, a place called Love is beautiful.
yeah,
There's a couple of more humorous songs on this one. I think outdated and antiquated
yeah,
and barn conversion obviously are pretty
yeah.
lighthearted.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking of um, wistful, there's a sort of feeling of time passing and
Mm.
looking back, like when our love
Yeah,
was
there's a
new.
little nostalgia on it for sure. It does have
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
Powder Blue is, it's kind of about my childhood, and even what I had in mind, which is sort of dealing with. I had a rough time in school. They didn't really know what to do with me, and just how it all kind of worked out. And by the third verse, you get a sense that you know a kid from St. Catharines with not very good prospects. It's sort of my dreams came true. There's this feeling, but where that kind of thing wasn't really happening on the last album, which was more, I don't think I could have wore a feather boa on the cover of this album, because it wasn't that vibe. I don't think.
Right, right. I mean, I get the sense too with Hermitage, a big chunk of it was sort of the doing the McCartney solo thing,
Yeah,
that took up a lot probably of the space in your head in terms of how am I going to put all this together and perform all this. Whereas with this, you were again just able to concentrate on the songs and your own performance and kind of let Brad and whoever else, handle all those other details. That must, take a lot of weight off in that sense.
yeah, and the great thing about Brad, I mean, with the last record, even the Last Rider, which I also produced with Don Kerr,
Right.
I was having to be kind of like the arranger and thinking, well, what do I want the bass player to be doing? What do I want? Where in the past the
I was going to know
producers,
what to do with the bass. Yeah.
yeah, and the producers would kind of do that in the past, and I would always have my say and all that. But with this record, like Brad had, I had no idea he was such a like an arranger, like he did all the string and woodwind arrangements, and he had all these, I always come into the studio with ideas of how I'm going to sing it, where I'm going to put the harmony and all this sort of thing. And so I would go out and try all these parts that I worked out, and almost every single time Brad would say, that's great, but I tried this instead. And so I tried his way, and it was always better. And it kind of was annoying a little bit too. And he had such this amazing sense of harmony, and he had me trying things I never would have thought to try. And that was true about everything, about the grooves on the record, instrumentation. So at a certain point, I just said, well, I mean, I'm just going to be the artist. I'm just going to sing, and because I felt he really knew what he was doing, and in a way that almost no other producer I ever worked with did. And so I don't know why it took me so long to make a record with him. So
Well, I'm glad it worked out. I mean, I find it interesting because, again, you talking about being a creature of habit and a man who likes his routines. It's like you've had this sort of almost a rotating cast of producers that, you've had 3 or 4 guys who you'll kind of do a couple with one and then go to the other and then go back and forth. So it sounds like maybe now Brad's going to be part of this group.
I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I have again, like I'm in that position now where I have like about 7 new songs on the go, but
70.
they're not finished, but they're just.
Oh, but are they all just up here, or do you have like demos or?
These ones I don't have demos of, but what I do have is I have a folder on my computer with lyrics.
Oh, okay.
And whenever I get more, whenever I get further along with, I'll go in and I'll edit or tweak this and that. But they all, because the music I commit to memory, so I can open the folder and play the song, and I'll try it out in different keys, different tempos. I'll go to the piano, and sometimes taking the song that you started on guitar and taking it to the piano can take it in a place you never expected, and vice versa. So I haven't even thought that far ahead in terms of producers. I mean, certainly I would work with Brad any time. I also, there's a couple times where I almost got to work with Daniel Lanois, and something would always come along, that he was too busy, like the U2 or Sling Blade. And I always thought I would still love very much to make a record with him someday. I don't think it'll probably never happen, but the other day I was thinking, oh, I wonder if, because some of these new songs I thought might be up his alley, whereas I don't think he would have liked the songs on Hermitage or something, but these new ones I have might be more. Anyway, that's just a pipe dream, but.
Well, it seems pretty reasonable to me. I mean, he's he works with a lot of people and he's fairly accessible. I mean, having talked to him a few times, I mean, he's got that Neil Young sort of mindset of he just follows whatever, an idea pops into his head in the morning, and that afternoon he's making an album about it. He's that kind of guy.
I mean, we worked together before, on my first album, and
exactly.
And he took photos for a couple of my albums actually. But I remember around in the early 2000s, I remember him saying something to me like he didn't think it was in the cards for us to work together, which I thought was, I mean, I don't really know, who's holding the cards, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, if that would be one of those things that would be a fateful thing if it happened, if we ran into each other, if he happened to like the song, right. And then if I could afford him too is the other thing. But anyway, but certainly Brad, I would really enjoyed our time in Nashville, and but I don't know, my new album isn't even out yet, so I probably shouldn't be getting ahead of myself with
no,
whatever the next one might be,
Yeah, but I'm fascinated by this process. I mean, 70 songs seems just like
no, seven songs.
Oh, 7. I thought you said 70. Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, 70 would be a lot of songs.
I was going to go, my God, man. So I mean, do you think, I mean, in general, is it, you'll add 3 or 4 more to that, and that'll be an album, and that's just the way it kind of works for you? You don't overwrite like to that point of having 20 or 30 songs?
Oh, in the old days, I would.
Oh, yeah.
In the old days, I would go in with the record, or at least into the pre-production part of the record with about 30 songs. And then you're whittling it down, and you have an A list and a B list, and there's always a bit of a tug of war with Mitch. With Mitchell Froom, there was always a tug of war. Even with Steve Earle, the record I did with him, he really wanted it to be like a rocking album, and so some of the ballads I had, he didn't really want to do at that time. Right. So, but nowadays I don't write as much. So it's usually when I go into the studio, I have like about 15. And that's and then I could, sometimes the album will have 14 songs on it. So there's like on this one, there's one that we left off called Flowers All Along the Pathway. Right. But but I'm sure, like I say, I have 7 now. I'm sure by the time if it comes to that, I'll have probably another 4 or 5 or 6 or something.
Right. Well, it's also you don't want to go in. I think maybe a lesson you learned from the old days, if you go in with 30 songs, it's too many choices. This way you're kind of going, okay, we can move 1 or 2 around, but that's it, right?
But also some of the songs that were left over would make it on the next album or the one after that, or sure. You know what I mean?
You don't have a lot of strays, and you're like.
No, I try to get around to finding a home for each one. or sometimes a song won't make it on my album, but someone else will do it, you know,
Right.
or something like that. But yeah, I like even on this album, there's a song called Diamond Wave, which I wrote in 1988, and I forgot about it. And you know, and all these albums later, I was, you know, I was just reminded of it. When I was around the house singing these new songs, I just started playing this old song called Diamond Wave, and playing it in a different key, and I tweaked some of the lyrics. I remember Colleen, my wife, going, "Well, what's that? Well, that one sounds really good." I go, "This song, you kid, that's like I wrote that, you know, I was like 23 or whatever I was."
Yeah.
And then, so when I was demoing the songs to send to Brad, I just I put it in there, and that was one that he really liked. So anyway, I don't know why it's just been collecting dust for decades, but I was really happy to find a home for it.
Yeah, well, they get finished when they get finished. And I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's not like you listen to and go, "Oh, this one it sticks out like a sore thumb" or anything. I mean, to me, that did it change a lot from 1988?
Yeah, because
98?
well, they changed definitely in terms of key. It's a bit lower than it was, um, but I remember I did a demo of it actually in 1988. It sounds very 80s, you know, it's like electric guitars and all this kind of, it's not very good. So, and Brad gave it this kind of Tex-Mex vibe on the record with this sort of, I don't know, classical guitar going through it.
Yeah,
And
it's got that little time jump,
yeah,
right? Like it's not all, it's like 4/4 and 3/4 or whatever. It kind of shifts around. Yeah.
yeah. And I added that sort of, I'm a big Buddy Holly fan, and I added that thing where it goes ding 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 ding, you know, like a lot of his songs would have these little kind of syncopated things, and yeah, so it sounds to me, it's on the record, it sounds kind of exotic, you know, like we've, you know, on a beach somewhere or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's very different than, and also I think lyrically it makes kind of more sense to me now than when I wrote it, and that's, I don't know why that is exactly, but
Hmm.
it could have been about Colleen and I, you know. So
Right. I'm glad you mentioned Buddy Holly because the first thing that popped into my head as soon as A Place Called Love started was that this is a Buddy Holly song if I've ever heard one.
oh wow, yeah. I mean, I never thought that, but he's definitely, you know, he's in my DNA. I mean,
Sure.
you know, the very first guy really that made me, it sort of ignited the spark, because my mom, like actually my dad left when I was 2, but he left all his records, and so I was allowed to play his box of 45s, and in the box was a song called "It Doesn't Matter Anymore" that Paul Anka wrote,
Right.
and I played that song over and over and over. I just couldn't get enough of it, and I knew he was dead. You know, this would have been like 66 or something, and that gave it an extra spookiness on top of, you know, so listening to the record, I just, and that was kind of like the beginning for me, and I, you know, and all, without Buddy Holly too, you probably don't get the Beatles, you don't get, you know what I mean, like he was,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
you know, and he was
Probably
only
less.
22 when he died. So
Yeah.
so you know, also I wore glasses when I was a kid, so I related to him more than Elvis Presley or someone like that. So
That
I
makes sense.
just, so he's really, he reigns, you know, or he ranks pretty high for me. Yeah.
Well, yeah, as you should. You know, talking about that, about songwriters you admire, I was surprised, but pleasantly surprised to see you in that Doug and the Slugs documentary that aired on CBC just a few weeks ago. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess it makes sense because I mean, from my perspective, he was always sort of an underrated songwriter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I finally got around to watching. I have a hard time watching myself on TV. So it took me a long time to get up the nerve. And I really, I didn't know a whole lot about them, but I was certainly a fan of their music. And I remember seeing them on some talk show in the afternoon, a Canadian talk show, and just really kind of not understanding was this new wave. I didn't really know what kind of music it was,
Yeah,
and but I always liked his phrasing and his sense of melody,
yeah,
and you know, he had so much charisma, and um, So, you know, the only reason they asked me to be a part of it is because I have this YouTube channel where I do cover songs.
Hmm.
And I guess they'd seen me do a cover of Day After Day, which is my favorite Doug and the Slug song. And that led to this whole thing. Um, but yeah, you know, I really love, you know, I love Canadian pop music of that era. And I was always kind of sad that they never really broke through in the way that
Yeah.
they should have, right?
Yeah. Have you ever thought of doing an album of just all covers?
Oh yeah, I have, but the problem is because records are so expensive to make, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe less expensive now, but whenever I got around to making a record, you know, it was usually because I had a bunch of new songs that I'd written. If I was one of these really big selling artists and I
Sure. You
could
didn't have to
go to
worry
the
about
label,
publishing? Yeah.
yeah, and I could go to the label and say, hey, I want to do an album of my favorite,
Mhm.
you know, Buddy Holly songs or something. And they would, okay, here you go. But I never really felt I had that kind of clout in a way.
Mm.
Um, so my YouTube channel, though, I've probably done over 1,000 cover songs just in my kitchen and, you
Wow.
know, usually in my bathrobe or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's become my sort of personal tribute to all the songs I love. And, you know, I've never wanted to monetize it or anything. I just want it because it also looks like I'm left-handed because the computer films me that
Right.
way. So
Yeah.
everything about it is very amateurish, which I love. But some of the performances I'm quite proud of because I do songs from pretty much every era, from like the 20s up until, you know, early 2000s. And
Mhm.
then after that, there's not a whole lot I could do today. I don't think,
No,
but
I guess not. Yeah.
yeah,
They don't write songs anymore. They just write beats now, you know?
beats and they have some guy write the top line. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's obviously, I was just talking about this with another journalist from Ireland, but it's hard not to let the old man in. Like I find, you know what I mean? Like with the,
Uh-huh.
the new music, it's very easy to go, oh, it's all crap or whatever like this, because I have a certain thing that I'm looking for in a song, a nutritious thing with the lyric and with the melody that I don't get from today's music, you know.
Yeah.
And I know there's talented people out there. So, but it's hard to not have a knee-jerk reaction sometimes, you know.
Well, that's, I mean, that again, that brings me back to outdated and antiquated, which is,
Yeah.
you know, somebody was telling me you don't have a cell phone.
That's right. And that was partly the inspiration. But you know, when the pandemic started, you know, it was such a crazy time. And Gordon Lightfoot put out a new record right as the pandemic was starting, and it would seem like a miracle. And so every day I walk with my disc player around the river with this, listen to the Gordon Lightfoot record. I listened to it every day. Probably for the first few months of the pandemic became my routine.
Hmm.
People give me strange looks when they see me carrying a disc player around, but that's how I listen to music. I don't have a phone. And I know you on your phone, you could have every song in the world at your fingertips, you know.
Yeah.
But I like albums and I mostly listen to vinyl at home and I don't drive. I mean, obviously I have a laptop,
Mhm.
you know, and
You don't
what's
drive?
no, I don't drive. I don't. Yeah, I'm really. Yeah, I'm kind of like a Forrest Gump character or something. Although he drove, I think, didn't he? Anyway,
I don't know.
um,
You're a Luddite.
yeah, I'm a Luddite,
Yeah.
and I kind of like it that way. But it is frustrating sometimes for the label and this and that when they want me to engage with this. Like they want me to do TikTok. I don't want to do TikTok. I don't.
I
My
can't see you on TikTok, my friend.
No. My wife handles everything for me. She does the Facebook and all I do is Twitter because I found a way to make Twitter work for me
Oh,
because I do jokes and
yeah.
I upload videos and archival photos and I really like it, you know, although sometimes I wish the internet had never been invented.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously made things easier, but it's also created so many other headaches with
Oh, yeah. The internet's the end
people.
of everything eventually, I think, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
steals everyone's. There's so many scammers out there and all that. So, and I see a day coming when I get off all internet altogether. It's not that time now, but I see a day coming because I creates a lot of anxiety with me as well.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes people come after you and they say horrible things and stuff like that too, and this makes me like, why did I don't need to see that, you know, I should just get off this thing. And so that day is coming, but I'm not quite ready yet. So,
Eventually, it's just going to be you and the
well,
house and the guitar, and that's it, huh?
yeah, I mean, I'll keep my email, I guess,
Yeah.
because I have a landline that worked before. I didn't even have an answering machine before 2001. So if I had to be in the house, otherwise I would not know that you called or something, right?
That's okay though. I mean, I totally agree with a lot of what you're saying. So many of these things we just don't need, and now they've got, the artificial intelligence where you could go in and type in, write a song about the owl that lives outside my house, and you wouldn't even have to write lyrics anymore.
Well, also the weird thing is sometimes Colleen and I will be just talking about something random, and she'll notice later on her phone there's people directing her to this
Oh yeah, they're
artist
listening. Yeah,
that's listening, and that creeps me out.
yeah.
Or sometimes even our GPS, we'll be talking in the car and we'll be talking about something. We'll notice that the GPS is pointing us in the direction of some maybe restaurant we were talking about. I don't know. It's weird. So um, I don't know. And I'm almost 60, so I don't see myself. I mean, I'm actually afraid that one day I'll go to use my phone and it won't work anymore, and I'll have to get one of those stupid things. But
I'm just amazed that you can do without it when you're on the road, because to me, that would be the one place where it would seem to make a lot of sense in just being able to, be reachable and reach people no matter where you are.
they've tried to get me like manager, and I know I won't have it. And I don't really like to be reached, to be honest. And
Yeah,
but the thing, when I'm on the road, I always have a road manager,
sure. Yeah.
and they have a phone,
Yeah.
and they'll tell me, whatever I need to know. And in the old days too, before Zooms and things, I had to do a lot of press on the road, and I would just sit in my hotel room, and they say you have 5 interviews today. I would just sit there on the phone for hello, and you could be in your underwear or whatever. It didn't matter really, because you're just, and I miss that a little bit. The first year or so of Zoom, I couldn't get my computer to do it, so I would always have to. It was annoying because I'd always have to get my wife to set me up on her computer, and that was annoying for her. And so I'm really happy now. I know how to do it. I get the link and it all comes up. But for a while, I whenever I had an interview request, I'd say, could it be a phoner by any chance? But anyway, I'm little by little, I sort of get the hang of certain things.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Talking about being out on the road, I see you're going back out again. Is this sort of the first time you'll be going out again for like a long extended time
yeah,
since pandemic? So how
well,
do you feel about that?
I have mixed feelings. I mean, these are definitely the most dates I've had since pre-pandemic time.
Okay.
I did tour last year.
Right.
I did a cross Canada Whitehorse to Ottawa, and then we did the East Coast. And I also did a few shows in England and one in Ireland. And I thought that was a lot of shows, but not compared to what we got. I mean, in America, I'm playing the most shows in the USA since ever, I think.
Wow.
And then from there we go to Ireland. I'm doing a full-blown Irish tour, like 8 or 9 shows, and I'm doing a few. So I feel, the older I get, I feel more like a homebody, where the idea of traveling, it sort of upsets my routine.
Right.
And so all I'm thinking about, I'm looking forward to the shows and all
Mhm.
that, but we're supposed to come home on May 29th or something. And all I'm thinking about is how happy that's going to be when we pull up our driveway again and we're home for a stretch. And I mean, we are coming home a little bit in March, a little bit in April for a few days to do our laundry and that, and then going back out. But it's really the amount of work my wife has had to do, because she's my road manager, in preparation with all the booking flights. And I mean, all I'm doing is I'm just sort of rehearsing every day and going for walks. So I think it'll be nice once we're in a car and we're checking off. We just did Boston, we did Connecticut.
Mhm.
And I know it'll be a great feeling because it's all solo too. It'll be this amazing feeling of accomplishment at the end of it, that we did it. We got to all these places. I didn't get sick. I didn't, you know, they didn't lose our bags, hopefully. All this kind of stuff that makes touring not fun. But yeah, so I have mixed feelings. I'm excited and I'm also dreading aspects of it. So.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned this earlier, you're going to turn 60. I am turning 60. We're only a few months different
Oh,
in age.
wow. Awesome.
So, how do you feel about that? About being 60?
I'm trying to be okay with it. I felt I felt almost traumatized turning 50. I remember that was a big one. And my wife threw a party for me, and I remember Kim Cattrall showed up, which was pretty strange because we had this crappy little house in Toronto that we were renting, and she came with a friend of ours, and I just felt I couldn't get over the fact that Kim Cattrall was in my house. I was like, whoa. Anyway, I'm getting off topic there, but yeah, 60. I mean, it feels like a big number, and I'm definitely feeling the ravages of time. You know, like I'm losing my hair on top. It's harder for me to lose weight. It's I get up in the morning and I'm walking like an old man for the first half an hour, and then finally I'm like, oh, I'm back in the zone again.
Uh-huh.
So, and I'll have all these mystery pains all the time, like, well, what was that? And so there's a lot of things I'm not too happy about. And
Sure.
lately, actually, my left ear's been bothering me. I don't know what that is. So there's always some weird thing to worry about. But you know, when you think of McCartney and those guys, and they're still rocking, and they're 80 or whatever,
Yeah.
so it feels actually relatively like a young age, 60. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Burt Bacharach was working up until I think last year or something, probably, and he just passed at 94. So
94, and that's, yeah, I mean, that day is coming for us, and we, you know, and we've lost some.
Crosby,
David
he was working
Crosby.
right to the end.
No, yeah, I mean, when you do this for a living, it's almost like it's a life sentence. You know, it's really, even if you want to quit, you'll
Mhm.
you'll come, and some songs will start coming, or someone will call, they want you to come and do this or that. So there's no really way around it. And I don't want to quit either, but I do love, maybe since the pandemic, I have enjoyed being a homebody, and I like that, you know, that the world kind of stopped briefly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was a sad time, but there was some good things that came out of it,
Yes.
and and I think it really made people, it gave people pause, you know, about they started worrying about things, and other people too, you know, and all these things we take for granted, you know. So there was some good thing. But I definitely, I don't think after this tour I'm ever going to want to tour as much. Like I'll still tour, but I'd
Yeah.
like to do more, you know, surgically precise. You know, like I'm going to go over there and do a few shows here. I just don't want to be on the other side of the world if something horrible happens, or some
Mm.
crazy, you know,
Yeah. Run into
apocalyptic thing
somewhere.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to stay here, and because I just thought about it. You know, I pretty much from 1994 to 2017, I kind of toured nonstop. Like
Wow.
I was always touring, or if I wasn't touring, I was away somewhere making a record.
Right.
And so to have those, and then I didn't tour at all in 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic happened. So it was such a huge chunk of time to, you know, to be in kind of one place, and and then I realized, oh, this isn't so bad actually, you know.
Exactly. I hear you. Well, listen, that seems like a good place to end it. I'll let you get back to being a homebody and go for a walk with what are you listening to now?
um, well, I've become, during the pandemic, a huge fan of Warren Zevon, who
Oh, yes.
I always liked Warren Zevon, but during the pandemic I became obsessed to a point where it was kind of like the only guy I really wanted to hear. It was like, you know, getting me through. You know, his music felt heroic or something, right? It was funny, and you know what I mean. So every time I see another album of his that I don't have on vinyl, I'll pick it up, or whatever.
Have you
And
covered it?
oh, on my YouTube channel, I have
Yeah.
many times. Yeah, I've
Oh, okay.
done, and I'm always playing his songs around the house on guitar, and so I'm listening to that. I'm also listening. I just finally got an advanced copy of my album just yesterday. So I was listening to that, and which is nice when that day arrives when you pull out of the box and there's your record. And
Can you appreciate it, or do you only hear the bits you don't like?
It's hard for me to listen to my own records. I do on occasion. If somebody tweets, "Hey, I was listening to blah this album" or whatever, sometimes it'll make me go, "Oh," yeah, and I'll get up the nerve and I'll go put it on. And
Well, I
and
bet the
usually,
old ones sound great, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's always stuff. My ear will go to things like, oh, mostly vocal things. I wish I had sung that better or this and that. But yeah, but this album, I'm really pleased with the way it sounds, and how I'm singing on it. It's not always hasn't always been the case with my records, but no, I'm really proud of my body of work. And but I don't listen to my stuff that much. But yeah, a lot of Warren Zevon, and um, I still listen to a lot of Gordon Lightfoot. And I have, I love a lot of his later albums that nobody ever talks about, like
Yeah.
Waiting for You, and
But that's the cool thing about having that big body of work, like you've now accumulated, is there are so many entry points for people. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's not just based on, oh, well, here's your 10 singles or whatever. There's, people will go, oh, I've never heard this album, and they'll pick it up, and that all of a sudden, same way you did with Zevon or whoever, it's great. It's one of the joys.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are single artists where you kind of just want their singles,
Yeah.
but there are album artists, and I've always considered myself an album artist. And yeah, people will say, "Oh, I first heard you on Time Being, and then I went back and got your other records." And that's what I do when I get into someone. I want to hear everything. I'm like a completist,
Yeah.
and that's just I've always been that way. So
Yeah, and I think it's great now that you're one of those guys that can do
yeah,
that.
and yeah, I pinch myself. It's amazing. So
All right, man. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for another great album.
thank
I
you.
hope we get 17 more before you die at 94 or whatever.
No, knock on wood, yeah. No, I definitely want to make a few more. So thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me on your show, and take care until where are you anyway? In Toronto?
I'm in
No,
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, hopefully, I was playing there last year, so but maybe I'll see you out there next year or something.
I'm
So
sure you'll be through sometime.
all right, thanks, man.
All right, take care. Bye.